Hello everybody, this is Rajiv from GMATWhiz, and I welcome you all to today's video. A brief before we get started. Many of us, especially working professionals, we believe that, sorry for that achieving a 700 mark is extremely time intensive, and that is the myth that we are going to break today. So there's a lot to know and a lot to learn, and for that we have Sanjog with us, who has scored an incredible 710 in just 100 hours of effort, right? So that is what we're going to know today, that what all things we can incorporate at our end in order to ensure that we achieve that score in the stipulated time. And with round one deadlines beginning from like August end and September first week, it becomes imperative to know that we get on our feet now, we get the score, and we start working on an applications, right? So welcome aboard, Sanjog. Thank you for joining us in today's video and helping and agreeing to help out other students as well. So yes.
Hey Rajiv, hi. Yeah, good to be here to have a conversation with you as well. So yeah, pleasure is all mine as well.
Great. So when we were speaking the other day, you mentioned about getting other scores, attending GMAT and pass as well. So how do you feel now getting a 710 in just 100 hours of effort post your other attempts?
So I would say that's a burden off the chest, first thing. But yeah, it had become a part of my lifestyle as well, preparing a little bit for the verbal. Devoting most of my time for the verbal, devoting a little bit of time for the quant. So for the past, I would say 3 to 4 months, I was really working hard for this because I had figured out that you need to get to the very bottom root of it to get a 700 plus score. Because if I can say that I had achieved basically a score plateau of around 690, and to get above that 700 mark, the GMAT does require you to be very meticulous about your approach and your methods as well. So working on the ground basics helped me a lot, and for that reason, I am very grateful to GMATWhiz as well, because all the things I cannot simply point out at one particular thing, because I took a lot of help from the verbal sessions that I had with Sunita ma'am as well. And then again, although I didn't think that it would come to use, but the AI powered quizzes and the mocks, they were of great help as well, because they were able to pinpoint the exact things that I needed to work on more or to improve on. So these were the things that were really helpful for me and that really pulled me up in the crunch time, I would say the last 3 or 4 months. And I think, yeah, I can say that this was a boost in my preparation that helped me.
Great. Thank you for such kind words. Appreciate that, Sanjog. So why do you think, what went wrong in your earlier attempts? And why weren't you able to score the scores earlier?
If I can be very honest, I would say that I maintain my quant score. So on the quant front, I don't think there was anything much to do. But yes, I would say that there was a lot of work to be done in the verbal section. In my previous attempt, I got a verbal of around 32, right? So after having a couple of sessions with Sunita ma'am, I did realize that the approach that is required to get a proper verbal score and in the process get a 700 plus score requires much more understanding, I would say. If I elaborate on this, then I can say that if we are talking on the levels of sentence correction, then we always tend to look out for different rules, structures that we have read, right? That we prepare accordingly from different sources. But the major thing that I would say that worked for me is, and I can fairly say that it will work for many of the students, is working on the meaning approach, getting to the very root of the meaning of the sentence and trying to convey what the sentence stem is trying to actually say is going to help a lot of people, because in the process you'll be able to get to know what the sentence is indicating, and in the process you can eliminate majority of the options that is there in the question stem, and that is how GMAT tests you. It basically does not test on the idiom knowledges or if you know what is a noun or a pronoun or something like that. So basically it just wants to know that if you are able to recognize a proper frame structure as per the intended meaning, and whether you can recognize the mistakes as per that.
Okay.
So in the basis of sentence correction, I could say, yeah, getting to a deeper meaning has helped me a lot. Similarly, getting to the root meaning of it works for critical reasoning and reading comprehensions as well. Because if you see that the sub 700 score, the below 700 scores, the level questions that you come across any platform, maybe GMAT Club or any chapter quizzes, I can say. The below 700 level questions requires you a normal level of understanding that you can solve without delving deeper into the question. But once you get the 700 plus level questions, it basically requires you to get to the very bottom of it, and you have to very sure what the premise is and what the conclusion is and what the question stem is asking. So it's basically, you may find the question stem easy, but then again, the options that will be given, I mean to say that when you might find the paragraph or the question easy, but the question options that are given to you, that might be very tricky and that might test your actual depth. So I came across this once I started getting the 600 sub 700 questions correct. I started getting more and more of these questions in my quizzes and mocks as well. So I can say that getting to the very bottom of it is the first thing that I would recommend to any GMAT aspirant that would help him notch a 700 plus score.
So according to you, that approach towards in-depth meaning, towards analyzing the sentence correction prompt or any other questions prompt, to analyze it in its entirety, that analysis, that structured thinking was missing from your earlier preparation, if I'm not wrong.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can say in the verbal section. So we were basically tending to attempt all the questions. What I would say whatever qualities we have built up over the last few years, we use that, and we tend to believe that we'll be able to solve the verbal questions. And for that reason, we do not get to the deeper meaning or to the deeper level of the questions. Because I would say GMAT verbal is very different from whatever we speak or whatever we write. It basically tests you on if you're able to convey the absolute perfect meaning that the author or that the question is trying to test you. So yeah, that is the thing.
So that is what you think. So you realize that that analysis or that structured thinking was missing from your verbal preparation, right? So how did you stumble upon GMATWhiz? How do you narrow it down to GMATWhiz? Or were you preparing with other sources as well earlier?
Yeah, I was preparing for the sources as well. I was heavily reliant on the GMAT Club platform as well for the questions and stuff, because regularly questions get uploaded. And so that is your go-to aid for every GMAT aspirant.
Definitely.
But I would say that when I gave my attempt and when I got a 690 again, I realized that during the exam, and this happened with me during the exam, I can say, during the exam, whatever we try to learn during the learning process in the last few months, during the exam, in the crunch of time, you tend to panic a bit and you tend to revert back to your original methods, which you have inculcated for the last few years. This has happened with me.
Yes.
This happened with me quite often. So I realized that I'm not able to apply absolutely everything that I've learned, picked up, because of the crunch of time. So, and it was very important to me to realize that the thinking, the mentality, and the approach that I have, that is wrong. So before I came in contact with GMATWhiz, wherever I was preparing from, whatever sources I used, I was practicing, of course. I was coming across a lot of questions, and if I was getting the question wrong, I was coming across their explanations as well. So, of course, the explanations did provide that where I went wrong and what should be the approach, right? But I didn't get the answer to the question, why am I wrong? Or where am I faltering?
Exactly.
I just has to superimpose the methods or the approach that has been given by the other platform, right?
Other forums. So yeah, so that's one of the biggest drawbacks of preparing from unchannelized sources of preparation, such as GC, right? Yes.
And I do not mean to demean any exam, but in the GMAT, you don't find a circle, unlike other exams where you can find a circle, can have a proper discussion where you can discuss different questions and you can argue on any question. They can have a small debate as well. In GMAT, we don't have a proper circle in wherever I am staying. I'm in Bhubaneswar right now, and so we don't have a proper circle where you can discuss, right? So it was very important to me to discuss the questions and argue that what is my thinking, what was my approach behind this thinking, and what was my mentality while solving this question. So I came in contact with GMATWhiz because I realized that I needed to have a proper conversation with someone, and in the process sessions that would help me clarify where I'm faltering, because that was very important to me.
Makes sense. And that explanation, that clarification should have been provided by experts only. It should not be the case that, that just as it happens in other forums as well, that anybody can answer your query.
Yeah, exactly. So this issue I did figure out in the GMATWhiz as well. So I'm sorry, in the GMAT Club as well. So sorry. So what happened is, when we come across a lot of questions, right? So there are a lot of questions in GMAT Club, and if you're getting a question wrong, so you find the explanations just after the questions, right? But there are quite some questions where you do not find an expert answer. So you find an answer from random people, and you may not be very satisfied, or you may not be completely sold by those question explanations. So I made it a point that I get in touch with a proper expert, verbal expert, I would say, that would completely realign myself and my approach, because that was very important. So getting a 690, getting a score plateau is a very, I would say, it's a very painful thing, because you realize that you're almost there, but you're not quite there.
Yes, exactly.
And GMAT, and after a session with Sunita ma'am, I realized that I completely need to change my approach, and I need to start from the groundwork. Although it may seem that I was at a verbal 32, but jumping that barrier, I think I had to lay the groundwork again, lay the foundations again, and do everything from the very scratch. And
great.
Yeah, and GMAT, I'm really grateful for GMAT, which provided me that platform, as well as the expert as well, because that helped me immensely on the verbal front.
Great. So thank you, Sanjog, for mentioning out, because many times we forget this thing in discussions as well, right? We almost say what we can do right, what is to be done now, right? But then we forget to mention that what is actually wrong, right? Just as you mentioned this one beautiful point about preparing from unchannelized sources of preparation, such as GC and other freely available resources. So just so everybody, just to summarize these points, which I think is very necessary. The very first thing from preparing for unchannelized sources is that you only get to practice questions, but that practice is not structured. It's more passive rather than being active, right? So that's one point that Sanjog mentioned. And the other point that Sanjog mentioned was about the explanations. The explanations that you get may not be reliable, and you might not be fully satisfied with the answers, because it's like anybody can answer. It's not only experts that are answering, so you cannot fully rely on their advice, right? So it's better that you enroll yourself for a forum only experts can answer a query, and then where there is actually kind of an interaction going on between your explanation and experts answer, right? So that you are satisfied to the core at what is right and why is it right, rather than just accepting it on face value. So thank you, Sanjog, for such words, for such advice.
No worries, my pleasure.
Great. So Sanjog, let's get on to the next task. So you are there with GMATWhiz, and you know what went wrong, you know what to do right now, right? And you know the drawbacks of unchannelized sources. Now you've enrolled for proper course GMATWhiz, right? So what do you think? And you moved from V32 to V37, right? Right. And that too in just 100 hours of preparation. So, I mean, let's start from the very basic thing. In the initial part as well, you mentioned about sentence correction, relying on the meaning, right? So what's the approach that helped you in sentence correction, and how it propagated towards the other sections of the verbal as
well? Okay. Before I lay out my approach, I just wanted to point out a very basic minimal thing to everyone who will be watching this is no matter which stage you are at, right? No matter which stage of preparation you're at, may it be quant or may it be verbal, each individual takes a unique amount of time to prepare. So my suggestion to whoever is preparing or whoever is aspiring for a great GMAT score would be, never realign your plans or your approach or your learning to the learning hours of someone else, right? If 100 hours work for me, there is a possibility that you may complete the course in 80 hours, or you may work on them in 70 hours, or there might be a scenario where you might need 120 to 150 hours. So I would say that as long as you're picking up things gradually, you need not worry. You can learn at your own pace. And that's the beauty of the GMAT as well, right? You can appear whenever you are comfortable with, right? So my first advice will be that learn at your own pace, and that would really help, because sometimes what happens is when people kind of
Rush through the course. Yeah.
compare themselves, that this guy working professional 60
Yes,
hours per
exactly.
week and without any prior knowledge, and then he kind of appeared within 2 months,
Yes.
that they tend to think that if he can do it, then so can I, right? But that's not the case. So you need to pick up things at your own pace,
Own
because
pace.
everyone kind do not have the same
So
level of
without
understanding,
compromising
right?
the quality of the
Yes,
process
yes,
itself
yes, absolutely. So quality of picking up things, learning is very,
is
very
very
important,
important.
because uh, GMAT will completely test you on the exam day, right? And there will be always time crunch. I can say that, at least for the verbal section, because if you're an Indian, I can say, then you can more or less nail the quant section. If you're a non-native speaker, then you need to completely work on the basics and the
Makes sense.
foundation of the verbal section. That will help you.
Makes sense. Yes.
Okay, so moving on to my approach, right? Uh, I I was advised by Sunita ma'am after a couple of sessions that we start from the sentence correction, because that is where we start with a crude meaning reading. That was very important to me, a crude reading meaning. So in that, what we do is we see the sentence as it is, the structure, and we try to get what the sentence is trying to convey,
Mhm.
and what it is trying to convey is whether it is properly structured or not.
Mhm.
So that is what sentence correction tests, right?
Mhm.
So on the SC front, this approach really helped me, because previously I was more bothered about the rules,
Mhm.
and when I say rules, I just jumped into seeing whether there's any parallelism
There
error,
is
if there
any
is any
subject
comparison
verb
error,
error.
right, subject verb error. But in
Yes.
the process of forgetting that, the sentence might be grammatically correct, but it may not convey the intended meaning that it's supposed to, right? So this approach changed after a couple of sessions with GMATWhiz and Sunita ma'am, and I had to completely realign myself. So to a normal person, the verbal 32 to verbal 37 might seem like a decent increment, if not more. But I would say that I had to completely start from the groundwork, at least for the verbal section, because I realized that whatever approach that I had wasn't working very properly, and
Mhm.
that kind of pushed me to a score plateau rather than anything else. You know. So yeah, deep. I mean, digging deep into the question is the first and the foremost thing that you need to do when it comes to verbal. And I started with this sentence correction. It kind of helped me. It kind of laid the platform for me to then again get into critical reasoning and reading comprehensions. And then when it came to critical reasoning, then again I did require a certain amount of help from GMATWhiz and Sunita ma'am, because it was very important to know what the question is asking. So as I mentioned earlier, right, the below 700 level questions will test you on a fair amount of knowledge, I can say. But when it just crosses the 700 level barrier, then sorry, yeah, when it crosses the 700 level barrier, you find that these questions tend to get difficult. Like the passage, whatever is given, and the question stem that is given, right, there might be a subtle difference between two options, and you might get confused, and you eventually get confused in the exam as well because of the time crunch. So getting to the deep level of question can help you immensely
Mhm.
when it comes to verbal. And the
Verbal.
same, of course, the same goes for reading comprehension as well. The 700 plus level questions are basically long or short level passages that
Mhm.
relies on the question that relies on the
More on the
exam, I
logic
would say.
meaning. Yeah.
But the question and the question stem and the options that will be provided to you, those test you thoroughly. So I can say, of all the three sections, I was really underconfident in the reading
Reading
comprehension.
comprehension.
And yeah, Sunita ma'am did give me a couple of tips, couple of advices on how to tackle these, and it helped me in the exam as well. So getting
Okay.
to the deep level of it is the last line that I would say. It's the groundwork,
So,
and that is a must. That is a must.
great. So when you mention about getting to the core of the meaning and the intended, and the inherent meaning and the logic of the sentence correction prompt, so you also mentioned about assessing it in its own entirety. So how do you do that? What changed now? Did you change your reading habits, or did you start reading in a certain other way that helped you infer the meaning? How did you ensure that this time you were focusing on meaning, right, and you were not doing that in earlier way? Maybe you took pauses this time, right? So you analyzed. What did you do?
Yes, absolutely. So I had to completely change my reading style.
Okay.
Uh,
Mhm.
uh, when I first started with the sessions, I realized that I kind of breeze past the question, give it a glance, and then
Mhm.
again come back to it, and then again
Can
reread the
hear.
question, right? So that is a general habit that we have, that
Exactly.
we tend to
Yes.
inculcate. But I had to completely work on that because I was advised by Sunita ma'am that I need to go slow at first, because once you accrue the meaning and you go through the sentence by breaking it into different structures as per your convenience, you're able to pick up more quickly rather than rereading the question. When you reread the question, right, eventually it may seem that rereading was taking a lot of your time, because you need to get back and again to the question stem, right? This really helped me mostly in the critical reasoning and in the reading comprehension, because those are passages, right? In a sentence, you can afford to get back to the question again as you have the liberty of time. But in reading comprehension critical reasoning, you absolutely cannot reread if you're running on time crunch, right? If we get to the very statistics of it, we can say that we have around 36 questions and 65 minutes, right?
Exactly.
So it's absolutely less than 2 minutes per question, and reading comprehension will take time, right? So I was advised, if I'm very being very particular, I was advised that it's okay to take a bit of time reading the passage rather than spending time on the question
Question.
on the question, right? So that helped me a lot. I spent a bit of more of time on the reading comprehension passages. uh, it took me a bit more time initially because I didn't have much, I would say, grasp on my reading skills as well. So gradually I picked up on my reading skills. It took a little bit more time, and eventually built on it. And then as per the strategy, you tend, once you get thorough with the passage by taking a bit of time, you tend to take less time in the question stems that follow.
Makes sense.
So that eventually works, because then again, that if you are thorough with the reading as well, then the options will seem very evident to you, which the right options are, which are not, right? So that helped me a lot, and that was a very key aspect in my preparation, the reading part of it.
Great. So that means rather than skimming or rather than pacing over through a prompt, read it slowly, right? Give it due time, right? Until and unless
Yeah,
you have the meaning in the core of the code, right? You break it into
yeah.
different parts. You analyze those parts over then and there, right? Rather than just moving forward, and then summarizing that information, moving with that summary along. Great. So that does sound like a structured approach, right? So when you move from sentence correction and when we come into the critical reasoning part, there are two aspects associated with CR. One is comprehension and the other is analysis, right? So comprehension, you already explained a lot in detail, right? How do you come up with the meaning, why, how you focus on meaning? So how do you think one can actually improve CR skills apart from given that he has already worked on the comprehension, just as in your case?
Um, so if you are done with the comprehension, if you are very thorough with the comprehension, right, the next step would be to be very particular about what the question is asking you, right? So when we are on the, at least on the easy to the medium level questions, the questions are very straightforward, like which of these will strengthen, which of
Mm,
these will weaken, which of these we can infer, right? So once you raise the level of the questions a bit and get into the difficult zone, I would say the questions tend to become a little bit tricky.
great.
We can say that, for example, out of all these options, which conclusion is completely supported by the passage, or of all these options, which options, of all the options strengthen except, right?
Yes.
So the question stem kind of varies when we get into the difficult zone, right? But uh, yeah, once you're very thorough with the passage,
That's
right, you need to be very clear what the question is asking. You need to be very clear about what the premise is, what the conclusion is, what the counter premise is. I'm sorry, I'm talking on technical terms, but you need not remember it as premise or conclusion, but you can say that what all facts the author is using to
Exactly.
support his statement, and what all factors the author is putting up to argue or debate on his standpoint, right?
Makes sense.
So that was very important, and of course, getting into the deeper meaning of what the options are trying to imply will help you majorly, because maximum of the times most of the options tend to get eliminated because they try to subtly uh, imply what the question stem wants, but not exactly. And getting to the very root meaning of all the options will eventually help you to eliminate the wrong ones and get to the right one.
Great, makes sense. So this is how you actually analyze the structure of the prompt, right, given to you in CR. So
Mhm.
did you change any approach regarding option elimination? So for example, when we speak about CR questions, most of the time we also hear about pre-thinking, right?
Mhm.
So did you incorporate pre-thinking in your approach?
Yeah, basically, GMATWhiz, after taking a couple of sessions with Sunita ma'am on critical reasoning and also going through the platform. So once I enrolled myself in the verbal sessions, I got access to the platform as well. And I did get the chance to go through the chapter quizzes as well, because the platform kind of tests you from the very groundwork, from the very simple level of questions to advanced level of questions, and that kind of tests your where you stand at that moment, right? So the platform was very helpful in providing that kind of support. And then again, the particular thing that I can say that I took out from from the sessions with Sunita ma'am was that we did work on a few particular aspects, such as the comparison aspect, such as the frameworks, right?
Mm.
Uh, what all needed to be done in a particular set of questions, and then again the causality, and then again we can say that uh, the number type of questions that we come across here, right? So those are very important things that I came to realize once I had those sessions, and I came across a few more questions with them. So it was very important to me to talk it out with a verbal expert, right? Because if you're not properly laying out what you think and what you are what your mentality is on that particular question, then you tend to kind of compromise on either the framework of the question or either the mathematics of that question, because sometimes it does come and it's a headache, I can say, because you're working on the verbal question and there is some sort of percentage and there will be some sort of probability and you will have to infer. Then again comes the most tricky situation in the critical reasons as well, where they test on some, most,
Mm.
all, right? So
Exactly.
if you're not very particular on these wordings, you tend to get the questions wrong a lot many of times. So it was very, very important to me to lay groundwork on these aspects, the causality aspect, and the cause effect relationship, the comparisons, the number based
Symbol of
questions as well.
linguistics.
Uh, so yeah, we have. So the thing I would say is we have to get to the very root meaning of it. That's the bottom line of it.
Great. So focusing on meaning first, right, and then trying to analyze in which kind of framework, right, that question can be answered, right, so that you
Absolutely.
are able to restrict or you are able to limit the scope of the argument, right, so that you have a direction to think, right,
Yeah.
and in that direction you actually figure out, okay, these are the gaps. This is how I can bridge the argument between the facts laid out by the author and the conclusion that he has drawn, right.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
and then moving forward with the task. Great, that does make sense, right. Great, Sanjog. So moving on to the third section in reading comprehension, now there will be another activity that we'll be needing to do. reading comprehension. You've already mentioned about reading it in a fashion that you actually get to the core of the meaning, right? So you know exactly what the other author is trying to say at every point of time, right? And why
Right.
is he saying that, right? That's more
Right.
important to know. So how do you think that helped you improve your inferential skills, right? And also many a times we receive this feedback from people that this approach of reading, giving more time to reading passages, this take more time than just solving questions? How do you compensate for the time?
Uh, I would say that when you tend to work on the verbal section as a whole, right? When you tend to improve on critical reasoning and sentence correction, you would realize that your timing would definitely get down to under 2 minutes. It would be around 1.130, 140 around. Yeah, reading comprehensions are supposed to take time, and they will eventually. And so you have to make peace with the fact that it's okay to spend a little bit more time on the reading comprehension and little bit less time on the sentence correction
Sense.
and the critical reasoning. But it is absolutely necessary that you spend time, you invest yourself completely in the passage and get what the passage is trying to say. So when I started with my sessions on reading comprehension, right, the first and the foremost thing that I came to realize after discussing with Sunita ma'am is that when there are short passages, you tend to get what the author is trying to convey. You may falter on the options and the question, but when it comes to short passages, you tend to know what the author is trying to imply. 90% of the times, I wouldn't say every time. Most of the times you tend to get, but it's the long passage that kind of troubles the GMAT aspirants, right? So the first approach that I took was that it is very important to identify in a long passage what each passage of that passage is trying to convey. What is the function of each passage of the whole, right? So it is very important you for either you note it down mentally or even on a paper that what all the passages are, what is the flow of the passage and what each passage is trying to convey. That so mapping that would help you finally understand the whole passage as a whole, and will help you eventually to solve questions, because most of the questions, you will definitely get a
In some
question where
questions
it will be asked what the author is trying to
trying to
convey
say.
from the passage, what the author is trying to say in the second passage. So such type of questions are almost guaranteed in the GMAT,
Or maybe
right?
focusing on how the author is transitioning from one paragraph to another, and why is he doing that? There has to be a reason.
Correct. uh, that is absolutely when you say transitioning, so the reader has to be very mindful of transitioning words as well. And when I'm saying transitioning words, I want to simplify that, the words such as although, whereas. So such words which changes the direction of the flow are
Flow.
very important, because then they will help you to highlight what are the arguments that is putting forward, what are the opposing standpoints that is putting forward. And that will help, because then again, so in that scenario, what if we have two standpoints, you'll be in a better position to evaluate if you have mapped properly the flow of the events that have transpired, right? So yeah, these two things were the major drawback that I had in my previous preparations, because when there's a passage, I used to skim through it first, get the essence of the passage, what the passage trying to convey, and then again I had to get back to the passage as per the question requirement, which I would say initially it seems like it would take less time for you, but trust me when I say this, it does not. Because for each question you'll again have to go through the passage and find where you are trying, where the intercept from that question is getting discussed, and then again answer. uh, one more thing that I wanted to raise, particularly when it comes to difficult long passages, is the questions stem may ask one particular thing, right? And we may falter in answering the questions because we we tend to focus about only local inferences. Let me elaborate on that. So if, for example, there's a statement known as we went for a cricket match, there's a statement, and the question might have not been put directly to ask uh, which sport did we play, right? It must be talking about the passage as a whole, but you tend to answer, yeah, we
In a
did play
localized way.
cricket, because that has been stated very exclusively or very distinctively, right? So we tend to falter in those scenarios where we just focus on that
Great point.
particular intercept, whereas the question intends
Broader
to
level
test
idea.
you on the whole passage. This question comes up mostly in difficult level of RC questions that I came across, and this particular theory, the theory of local inferences and the global
Global
inferences,
inferences.
was introduced to me by Sunita ma'am, and this helped me a lot because I wasn't aware of this kind of approach, right? You tend to practice RC questions, you tend to get them wrong, and then you realize, okay, you might have missed this intercept from the passage, for which reason you got it wrong. But it's fine. Sunita ma'am did make me realize that you have gotten to the right intercept. It's just that you have to see it as a whole intercept rather than that one particular part.
Subset of it. Yes.
So yeah, this approach in RC kind of boosted my preparation and my level on RC as well.
Great,
And
great
yeah,
points, and Sanjog. Really great points. That explanation of localized and global thinking was very
Mhm.
explicit and it was well explained. Thank you for that, Sanjog. All right. So
No problem.
I see that you utilized both sessions from Sanita ma'am as well as the online platform, right? So this is a
Yeah.
kind of hybrid model that we use in our private tutoring packages as well. So what would you say would make out a difference? Would a private tutor only suffice the case, or it's better to have both? And if yes, then why?
Uh, I enroll myself for the verbal sessions, right? But I can say when I enroll myself in the verbal sessions, I did get a call from Piyush sir that we are providing the full access to the full platform, right? Do make sure that you do not slack up on the quant, because he did mention, and I have, of course, I have come across quite some scenarios where people, while working the verbal section, improving
They
on that, they tend to slack up on the quant section, and eventually they again get stuck on either the same score or the score gets reduced. So I did have a connect with him, with Piyush sir, although it wasn't exclusively mentioned in my package. So we did connect a couple of times. He did advise me on what my approach to quant may be, considering that I already had a quant 50. He did mention that, so we can fairly say that you have got the basics right. He did uh, push me to stay in touch with the quant section, keep on practicing the medium and the difficult level questions, and that's where the platform came into the limelight. The platform did provide me that opportunity to keep practicing, at least to stay in touch with the medium and the difficult level questions, because that is very essential. If you leave the quant section for a couple of months, for 3 months, and again get back to it, you need some amount of time to get yourself comfortable with the quant section, right? So the platform was absolutely necessary in that aspect. When I'm saying we had to stay in touch with quant. And when it comes to the verbal section, of course, it's needless to say that your sessions with your tutor will of course help you on laying the groundwork on your approach, right? But to maintain a proper flow and to your preparation, to maintain a proper cycle to your preparation,
so that you
to
don't
point
miss
out,
any gaps and weaknesses. They don't get
yes, yes,
stockpiled.
absolutely, and to make sure that whatever approach that you are picking up from those sessions, you test yourselves to that, right? The platform was really helpful in that, and setting up chapter quizzes, difficult level questions to advanced level, then to and the practice questions. They kind of helped me to build on the skills that I picked up from the sessions. And eventually, I had to. So after coming across those questions, I again had to reevaluate myself, and I again set up a couple of sessions with my tutor, considering that I again had some questions on my approach and on the question level, what I had learned. So I got those clarified as well. So it is a proper balance. I can say it is a proper balance that is necessary for a student. A verbal coach might be able to help you with your preparation, right? but to maintain a proper flow of the preparation, to maintain that level throughout the verbal section, a platform is required, in my opinion, I would say.
Okay, makes sense, makes sense. So moving forward, I think it's time to conclude everything now. So we have everything we needed, I guess, from the improvement perspective, from the structuring perspective as well. So what would be the last advice that you would want to give to people actually sitting in the examination room? What they should do then?
I would say if you're starting, right, it doesn't matter if you're starting or if you have already begun preparation. You need to focus on your accuracy and forget about the timing if getting questions right is a concern for you right now. Because once you build up on your accuracy and you work on owning those skills, right, the timing will eventually come down. Just like any other activity, if you tend to get perfect at something, the time will tend to come down definitely. So it is very important to work on the accuracy of the questions, and I would say getting to the very absolute and simple groundwork meaning of the sentence or the passage is a must for solving verbal questions. That will tremendously help you. And we
Stick to
know
the
that
process. Stick to the process that you have learned over a time.
Yes, you may have to be a little bit disloyal to the process that you have been so in love with for the past few years. But yeah, so the GMAT is the test. Is basically, I wouldn't say a test of knowledge, but basically it's a test of how you understand, how you
Things.
think, and how you are inferring. So it's basically a test of that for both quant and the verbal. You don't need to stress up about picking up a lot of new things. I would say you just have to work and sharpen your skills on those particular basic things that you know. And of course, we know that GMAT is an adaptive exam, right? So it is very important for you to get the initial questions right, as you may have come across on many platforms on tips on GMAT. I would say it is a proper advice that you should in fact try to get the initial questions right to set the tone of the exam and make sure that your score is not pulled down. Because if you try to get the initial questions right, the questions later on tend to get difficult, and this kind of pulls up your score range. So it is very important to maintain the accuracy of the questions. Try to maintain that. The timing will automatically get down once you improve on that. I'm sorry, Raj, I think you're on mute.
So yeah, so the focus should be on the process, right?
Yep,
And the time
absolutely,
will
absolutely.
be the time will be the time will come along its way as a consequence. Okay,
Yeah, for
makes
sure.
sense. Makes. So thank you, Sanjog. So congratulations on this score. But so which colleges and which round are you targeting this time?
So I'm planning for ISB right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be going full-fledged for ISB. I'll be applying to a couple of colleges abroad, Singapore, NTU, Nanyang Business School, and SMU as well. As of now, I'm having these colleges on my mind. Of course, I'll tend to research a little bit more and then again apply accordingly. But as of now, yeah, first and foremost, I'll be mostly targeting ISB with the profile and the, I would say, application that I have.
It makes sense. So that's all, guys, for today's video. And I think everybody got to learn a lot. Sanjog had some very good points to mention about that. Thank you. Have a great day, people. Thank you for joining, Sanjog.
Thanks a lot, Rajiv.